"Step back, sir. You don't have an invitation." A cold shout cut through the crowd surging toward the Greenwood, South Carolina memorial site. An old man with silver hair froze. He limped, clutching a faded soldier's cap, his face eerily calm. No one asked who he was. No one glanced at the crumpled envelope in his hand inside, a handwritten card in blue ink from his grandson, Grandpa. "Come sit with me, front row. Love, Jacob." A small line below. "You're my hero." But no one read it. No one cared to. They saw him as an intruder, a burden, an outdated relic that didn't belong on this solemn day. The young woman, blocking the gate, stood rigid. Her voice clipped and precise. "I'm sorry. This isn't an official invitation. You can't enter the honored section." Behind her, murmurs rippled. A man in a suit shook his head with a sneer. "Probably thinks he's some VIP." A middle-aged woman gave a thin laugh. "These old guys think a soldier's hat makes everyone bow." A teenager raised his phone, filming, muttering, "Sweet." TikTok content. The old man said nothing. He nodded faintly. Then, slowly, tucked the card into his inner pocket as if safeguarding something more precious than pride. Before turning away, he looked toward the distance where the war memorial stood, bathed in the morning sun, its golden inscription blazing as if to speak, "They gave their today for our tomorrow." A breeze swept the plaza. The flag above fluttered. The cap in his hands trembled slightly. A child passing by tugged her mother's hand, asking, "Mom, why's that man sad?" Her mother didn't answer. She just pulled her along faster. And so, he walked away. No one stopped him. No one looked back. Only one person, a young soldier in uniform, stood at a distance, his eyes wide with disbelief as if witnessing a wrong he couldn't yet grasp. The ceremony hadn't begun, but something had already gone terribly astray in that moment. The old man was Gerald Whitmore, a name unknown to anyone at this morning's ceremony, but hundreds of miles away, in a weathered nursing home on the outskirts of Fayetteville, North Carolina. That name is still spoken with quiet reverence. He was once a first sergeant, the last surviving radio man of Echo Company, 75th Infantry Division. In 1968, his unit was trapped in the jungles of central Vietnam for 47 days, with no supplies and no rescue. They shared drops of water caught on leaves and scraps of moldy rice from dwindling packs. From 42 men, only 4 survived, and Gerald was the only one strong enough to carry the heavy radio set out of the forest. After the war, Gerald refused medals. He skipped victory parades. He didn't step off any plane to cheers. He left his unit, quietly settling in the countryside, living as a carpenter, growing vegetables, and fixing church friends' roofs every Sunday. Few knew much about him. No one asked. They only saw a stooped old man, toolbox in hand, eyes bright when someone needed help. Each year, he attended memorials, never to be noticed, never in the front row, never on stage. He stood at the back, hand over heart, as the anthem played, a private ritual for those he never left behind, not even in memory. He had no family left. His only son died in a car accident years ago. His grandson, Jacob, was all he had in the world. An 11-year-old fifth grader at Greenwood Elementary. Jacob couldn't send an official invitation, but he printed a small card, carefully glued it, and slipped it into an envelope. In childish scrawl, he wrote, "Grandpa, come sit with me. Front row, love, Jacob," and below, in smaller letters, "You're my hero, the day before the ceremony." Jacob pressed the envelope into his grandfather's hand, saying, "Keep it safe. Grandpa, if anyone asks, show them this. I told my teacher to save you a seat, and Gerald kept it, as carefully as a sacred relic." It wasn't just an invitation. It was a promise, one he couldn't break. even for a child, and for the comrades he still lived for. None of those who mocked, jeered, or filmed him this morning knew this. Only one did. A young soldier, standing at the far edge, he'd seen it all. When Gerald was turned away, the soldier slipped from the rows. He said nothing. He stood at attention, eyes following the old man's fading figure through the gate. His hand gripped the name tag on his chest. Because of that name. Gerald Whitmore wasn't unfamiliar. He'd read it, in an old military memoir. A chapter on loyalty, about the last radio man, an unyielding symbol of Echo Company. And now, he realized, he'd just missed something he could never reclaim. 15 minutes later, the ceremony began. The flag rose to the mast's peak. The first notes of the national anthem echoed across the vast plaza, mingling with the wind, the flutter of fabric, and sunlight spilling over rows of pristine white chairs. People sat upright in uniforms, suits, and formal dresses, but somewhere a seat remained empty, a person missing. The young volunteer returned to the reception desk. Her face no longer rushed, but her eyes struggled to maintain composure. Her fingers fidgeted with the stack of invitations, as if hiding a flicker of unease. Then, a voice rang through the microphone, firm, solemn, yet faintly choked. "Before we begin this ceremony, may I ask, is Gerald Whitmore here?" The air stilled. A few heads turned, glances exchanged. That name wasn't on the speaker list. No one answered. The man on stage was Colonel Marcus Tillman, commander of the 3rd Brigade, heir to the legacy of the 75th Infantry Division. He didn't read from notes. His eyes pierced the grandstand. Hand gripping the microphone, voice trembling as if summoning a past no one present could forget. Has anyone seen an old man in a faded khaki coat, limping slightly, holding an old hat? Silence, an unnatural, heavy silence. The volunteer paled, her gaze darting to the gate where, minutes ago, she'd turned him away. Then, a hand rose from the back row. The young soldier, he shot to his feet, his voice clear and resonant. He was denied entry to the honored section. The plaza froze. The wind seemed to stop as if the air itself held its breath. Colonel Tillman set the microphone down. He stepped off the stage, slowly moving through the rows. No one spoke, no one intervened. Every eye followed him until he reached the gate. He knelt, picking up a small object left on the pavement, a faded, worn hat. He stood, silent, clutching the hat tightly. His fingers brushed its frayed brim where a faint inscription lingered, as if caressing a relic from a battlefield. He turned. His gaze swept the grandstand, and when he spoke, no one dared breathe, no one stirred. The plaza seemed to harden into stone. Without Gerald Whitmore, none of us would be here to hold this day. Those words fell like a bell tolling in the void. A thick silence blanketed the plaza. Even the flag's flutter seemed to sound out each beat, striking straight into hearts. No one dared move. No one breathed heavily. The volunteer girl covered her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. The man who'd sneered hung his head, hands gripping his briefcase as if grasping for a conscience slipping away. The teen filming hadn't stopped his camera, his hands trembling for the first time. The screen held no humor. Colonel Tillman turned to the young soldier. "Can you help me reach him?" The soldier nodded. "My truck's outside." They moved swiftly through the rows with no time for protocol and no room for doubt. A group of young servicemen broke ranks, falling in behind. No orders, no commands, just eyes and reverence. 5 minutes later, engines roared from the road's end. A convoy of black military vehicles rolled into the plaza. The crowd parted slightly. instinct warning them that what approached wasn't a guest, but a witness. A door swung open. The young soldier stepped out first, and then Gerald Whitmore. He descended slowly. His frail frame stood tall, his gaze fixed forward. His hand rested lightly on the soldier's arm, not for support, but to steady a stride no longer his alone. Colonel Tillman approached, wordless. He stood at attention, then raised his hand, a military salute, and before hundreds of stunned eyes, the serving colonel bowed his head to a silver-haired old man. 4 words, but they silenced the plaza. "Sir, welcome home." The man who'd mocked stood frozen. The volunteer girl lowered her hand, eyes red and brimming, and the crowd, none dared move, as if they were witnessing a moment beyond reversal. Gerald said nothing. He nodded faintly, then reached for the faded hat in Tillman's hand. His fingers brushed its frayed brim, tracing it as if touching a fragment of memory, never truly left behind. He looked up. His gaze swept the crowd, each flustered, ashamed, or choked glance, and when it rested on the volunteer girl, he smiled. A gentle, kind smile, no blame, no anger, only forgiveness, as if he understood and pardoned even without an apology. A young serviceman stepped forward, whispering in his ear. Gerald nodded, and then, like a river unleashed, the crowd parted. No one spoke. No one needed to. He walked toward the honored section. Jacob, the small boy clutching his handwritten card, leaped up. His eyes were red, his hands trembling, and he held out the card toward his grandfather. Gerald said nothing. He placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder and then sat in the front row. And for the first time in his life, Gerald Whitmore took the seat he deserved most. As he sat, a scattering of applause broke out. Then, wave after wave, deeper, slower, weighted with meaning, not the claps of excitement, but of reverence, of gratitude, of silent apologies. Each clap a bow, before a living piece of history seated there in the frail form of an old man in the front row. Colonel Marcus Tillman returned to the podium. He set aside his notes, his gaze fixed on Gerald Whitmore. "Perhaps today," he said, "we don't need speeches, we only need presence." He drew a deep breath, his voice clear, each word carved into the air. "I've served nearly 30 years in the Army, commanded in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa, but the man in that front row is why I could do any of it. Gerald Whitmore is not just a veteran. He is the sole survivor of the Battle of the Truong Sun Valley, where 142 men fell, and only he came back." The plaza was deathly still. He refused all medals, all honors, because he once said, "I won't take credit when my brothers were buried under that red mud." Tears welled in some eyes. An older man wiped his face with a handkerchief. The woman who'd scoffed earlier now bowed her head, hands clutching a prayer card as if holding something breaking within her. Tillman faced the crowd. "We've searched for him for years. We wanted him as our honored speaker today, but he has no phone, no social media, no fixed address. The only one who could find him was a boy named Jacob." All eyes turned to the honored section. Jacob, the small boy, stood, clinging to his grandfather's arm. His face was innocent, not fully grasping the moment's weight, but deep in his heart he knew that. His grandfather, for the first time, was no longer forgotten. A young officer stepped onto the stage, holding a wooden box. He opened it, revealing a Purple Heart medal and a handwritten letter from the commander-in-chief. Tillman's voice lowered. "Steady. We can't undo the past, but we can start today. Gerald Whitmore, on behalf of the United States Army. Please accept a fraction of the respect you deserve. No signal, no call. Yet the entire plaza rose, one by one, as one. Instinctive. Gerald remained seated. His trembling hands accepted the box from the young officer. He looked inside longer than expected, then nodded faintly. Silent. He bowed his head deeply, hand resting on his chest as he had done for years, unseen in quiet places. Only this time, they saw. The ceremony ended in solemn silence. No one left immediately. They lingered as if to hold on to the moment, to etch the image of the silver-haired man, cradling a wooden box on his lap, eyes closed, whispering to those long gone. Gerald said nothing. He didn't take the stage, didn't touch the microphone, didn't answer questions. As the crowd began to disperse, he rose quietly, placed his faded hat back on, and bowed slightly to Colonel Tillman, a gentle bow, but enough to bring tears to the colonel's eyes. Jacob took his hand, leading him away from the dais. They didn't take the main path. They circled behind the plaza to a row of ancient oaks and a lone stone bench facing the memorial. Gerald paused there, sat down, set the wooden box beside him. Jacob sat close, resting his head on his grandfather's shoulder. Neither spoke. They sat in silence, 2 generations guarding something sacred the world had nearly overlooked. Then soft footsteps approached, those who'd wronged him. The man in the suit removed his hat, bowing low, his voice faint. "I'm sorry for what I said, for not seeing you." The woman beside him, voice breaking, added, "We were wrong. Please forgive us." Gerald didn't reply at once. He looked at them. No anger, no blame. Just a gaze that seemed to urge them to remember something greater than forgiveness. He nodded. Then, from his pocket, he drew a folded scrap of paper, placing it on the bench. "Don't let those after us learn this lesson again." They left in silence, but when they glanced back, the paper remained. A gentle warning, impossible to ignore. Weeks later, the stone bench where he'd sat was refurbished. No statue, no plaque, just a small inscription carved on its back. "For those who need no invitation, for they are why this ceremony exists." From that day, the bench was never empty. Each Memorial Day, someone placed a faded khaki hat and a handwritten card. "Grandpa, sit with me. Front row. Love, Jacob." No one knows how long Gerald Whitmore lived after that. Only that he never returned. Yet, some say that before each memorial, they glimpsed an old figure under the oak, then gone. Though no one saw him again, his presence lingered in the way. Crowds bowed longer passing that bench, in the eyes of children asking parents, "Who was he?" And the answer is always the same. Someone we owe, though he never asked for anything. Some heroes no longer wear uniforms. Yet they lead, they carry on, they deserve to be seen. If this story paused your heart for a moment, share it with those who might forget that some bear the soul of a nation for us. Leave a comment, perhaps your grandfather, father, or an old neighbor was a hero no one knew. If you believe that someone needs no invitation to enter history, subscribe to our channel. We'll keep telling stories the world must never forget.